All right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Critical Podcast, and or the first one that you're seeing, depending on which version I decide to release first. So this one is going to be our top 10 albums and songs of 2024. Obviously, every year has its strengths for music. This was a pretty dang good year overall, I'd say. For metal, for sure. So the way
I thought it was the best year for multiple genres.
Yeah.
Multiple.
This year had some surprises for me, I'll admit it. This one had some surprises for me. But the way this works, if you have not watched it before, is we each do our number 10. So I'll do my number 10 song, number 10 album, number 10
number 10
song, and then James will do his number 10 album, number 10 song, so on and so forth. You get the point. You'll get into it after the first bit. So I guess we'll get right into it. I guess we start with, general thoughts on music first off.
Okay.
For this year.
Yeah, like I said, I do think that this was a really good year for music. As good as 2023 was, I do think 2024 was better. And I actually think this year, whereas for quite a few years, I think movies have mattered in the cultural conversation. I think this year music mattered a little bit more than movies in the cultural conversation. I mean, you have the dominate pop came back in a bigger way this year, and you'll actually see a couple pop albums on my list that were quite good. But big pop artists coming to fruition. But you also saw, I think rap had a great year this year as well. I mean, the domination of diss tracks was very unexpected this year, but they did very well. And they had, I mean, people were talking about them. They mattered, like I said. And like Joseph said, metal had a great year this year too. And I think this year was actually a good year for new metal bands. Like a lot of newer groups came out on top this year and really dominated.
Yeah.
And you'll see that reflected in my songs and albums. But I do think this was a really good year for music, for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is the first year, I think, since I started counting my top 10s back in 2014. This is the first time I think that a rap album has made my top 10. I know for a fact that it's the first time that a rap album has made on number 10. This is my number 10 album is Chromacopia by Tyler, the Creator. This guy is pretty dang good at what he does. I have to admit. I told myself that I would try to get into some different genres this year, and I heard his song Thought I Was Dead, and I was like, and I really loved that song. That was
Good
like
song.
a standout song. I was like, this is like actually pretty dang good. Like it had like a good beat, interesting vocalization. Like it's not just mumble rap, which for me is 95% of the reason I don't delve into rap, is because that's kind of what most of it is, it feels like now. But I digress. This album has some really great cuts. I'm not stalling to look up the album track list at all. Obviously, it opens with the title track, which is this really great orchestral sort of choral, like feels like a church service almost in a way. But I really love this album. It's a very personal album for Tyler. You can tell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very personal stuff in here. Hey Jane is about his girlfriend or wife. I think his girlfriend got pregnant or something.
Yeah, he's a father.
And he's a father now, and they were trying to decide whether to keep the baby or not. Very personal, really, really good song. And, there's some hilarious, wacky songs like Sticky.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure.
You got to go from Like Him to Balloon. Like Him is about he didn't know his father wanted to be his father initially. It's a very personal song with his mother's voice in it. Just a super, like, gut-wrenching and also at times hilarious album. This guy has a bit of a sense of humor.
He does, for sure.
And it adds to it. This album has a lot of really great instrumentation too, jazz all over the place, which is kind of primarily why I loved it. Has some really great beats. Just a genuinely surprising album. And this is once again a year where I'm starting out with a 4 out of 5 album, which just goes to show how amazing this year was for music again. My number 10 song is by a band that has not been around for a little bit, but they came back with a super good album, which I'll be talking about soon. But this is The Midnight Sun by Cane Hill. I love this song. That Cane Hill has come back with a much more refined sound than their past 2 albums. Even though I really do like Too Far Gone as an album. This album, which I'll talk about soon, the song individually is it's this half very soft spoken song with this sort of modulated voice tone, and then it goes into just complete breakdown nu metal. And Eli's voice is unbelievable in this song.
He's gotten so much better.
He's gotten so much better.
It's actually insane.
It's been 6 years, and you can tell this guy's been putting in the work. This song is just beautiful, great unclean vocals, great guitar work. I'm so glad this band has taken the next step. And yeah, I'll be talking about the album shortly. But that was The Midnight Sun.
Yeah. Funny you put Tyler at your number 10 because he's also at my number 10.
Oh, there we go. It always happens, doesn't it?
We always have something at the same spot every year. Almost
this year it's music and movies.
Yeah.
I don't know when that happened last. I'll have to look.
It's happened a couple times.
It happened in 2017, I think.
I know last year we had something in the same spot, but I can't remember if it was for music or movies.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I agree with a lot of your thoughts. I've listened to other Tyler albums. I think this one is probably my favorite by him. But, he has a really good discography, including like a couple that I probably have to return to. Like I wasn't big on Igor when I first listened to it, but I think if I return to it, I would like it more now. But that one's debatably his most ambitious. But this one, I think it's a good combination of everything he's been doing in his career. Like it has the rap bangers, but it also has the more experimental stuff that he did in his later career. I really like the song Noid, for an example. I love the guitar riff in that one, and the music sample they use in it. I
had a beer in the music video.
Yeah, it's really clever. Thought I Was Dead, I agree, just an absolute banger. And it's like, it's basically him like proving everyone wrong about like, oh, you thought because I was making more sensitive music, I couldn't make like the rap bangers. Like, no, I still can. Ratata is also another big banger that I love. I think the ending, I Hope You Find Your Way Home, is a really nice payoff, especially since his last album was Call Me If You Get Lost. It's like a sort of clever, like, continuation of that. Like, now they're no longer lost, now he's hoping that they find their way back home. And the whole thematic arc of the album about, like, wearing masks and, like, that hiding your insecurities and who you really are. I mean, it's very reflective of Tyler as a person, and he gets pretty vulnerable with that in a song I'll be talking about a little later. But I think I thought this was just a really solid rap album from front to back, even if it's not my favorite. There's another one I'll be talking about a little bit later, but this was a really great release. I really found it to be one that continued to grow on me as I listened to it more. Now, number 10, and I talked about how pop had a good year this year. This is a pop song, but it also definitely has some rock and even emo influences in it, I would say, and that is Cheerleader by Porter Robinson. This guy, in the past, has more been known for making more instrumental, EDM, dubstep adjacent music. He made a song called Shelter a couple years back that's really well known, really famous. I don't know if you've ever heard it before.
I haven't even heard of the guy. I guess I'm out of the loop.
You would certainly have heard Shelter. If I played it for you, you would recognize it. It's a pretty well known song. But this track is so freaking addicting. It has one of the most addicting synth grooves I've heard all year long. It plays over and over, but it doesn't get annoying, and it works very well. I also think this song was very relevant to this year. It talks about like parasocial relationships and the idea of fans feeling entitled to know every aspect of an artist's life to the point of toxicity. And he talks from their perspective, like he compares them to like a cheerleader. And like this cheerleader is like saying that it's not fair that he doesn't let them have full access to his life because they know him so well. They know everything about him. And it's a very interesting commentary on like how dangerous that can be and how parasocial relationships can be a problem. But Porter Robinson also acknowledges in a nuanced way that he needs the fans too. Like without the fans, he wouldn't have success. And it comes to this sort of devastating conclusion where the chorus says it's not fair from the fans' perspective over and over, but in the end, it's him saying it's not fair because it's like, it's not fair that you get to stalk me and all this stuff, but I still need you as my fans. And it's a very interesting, like, dichotomy between those two things. A lot of people have compared, like, the chorus of the song, the vibes of it, to, like, a My Chemical Romance song. And I can't say that I disagree, even though it's definitely more synth-heavy. It still definitely has this rock influence in it that I can't shake that makes me love it even more. Also, Porter's voice reminds me of Oliver Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon, and I think he does the hyperpop song better than what Bring Me the Horizon attempted on their album this year, in my opinion, because it's a little bit, I don't, it's more refined and it's more catchy here, I think. But yeah, this was one of my most listened to songs of the year.
All right. I said I'd be talking about this album soon, this soon. My number 9 album is A Piece of Me I Never Let You Find by Cane Hill. This album kind of came to me out of nowhere. I kind of thought, I didn't realize kind of Cane Hill was still around. Their last album was in 2018. They had released a few singles, but this album absolutely took me by surprise. Like, oh my gosh. Their last 2 albums, I don't think I've even made it into my top 15 probably, even though I do still like Too Far Gone. Their albums always felt a little bit underwhelming, amateurish. I don't know. Especially Smile is a very amateur album. But this album, you can tell they have completely upped their game from beginning to end. I already talked about Midnight Sun. The following track, Ecstasy and Grief, just slaps you in the face with his unclean vocals, which I love what he's done with his unclean vocals. Fade is an arguably very soft song for them, but they've always delved into that sort of softer nu metal side. And this album isn't even really much nu metal. They've very much so gone more straightforward hard rock, I'd say. But they have this really great atmosphere about this album overall. Songs like Permanence and Sleep, talking about death, finding euphoria. This album is really just kind of, it feels very much so reminiscent of how they came back, is like they are very much finding themselves in a way. Especially Eli seems like very personal for him throughout this album, talking about all these various things like ecstasy, therapy, stuff like that. And the album bookends itself with a repeat of Fade. Fade is one of the songs that I was going between Fade and Midnight Sun for my number 10 song basically throughout the entire last week. Fade is such a great, it's a haunting song about falling in love, sort of, but almost very creepy. Cane Hill has always had this sort of creepy vibe about them that's inspired by early Slipknot, obviously.
Very, yeah.
But man, I love the way this album ends with a repeat of Fade. It doesn't even feel like a repeat because it's like, it feels natural to end with that song. And this album, this is without a doubt the best Cane Hill song. It feels like what Beartooth was for Caleb Shomo after Attack. But this is the same band. But this feels like the beginning of something that's way more exciting for me for Cane Hill. So yeah. My number 9 song is by In Heart's Wake. It's called Shell Shock. This song has a very obvious reason why it's kind of here. On top of the fact that this In Heart's Wake is one of those bands that I feel like goes very underappreciated for how long they've been in the metal scene.
Yeah.
I mean, this is their 14th album, I think, or something like that. They lost their Queen vocalist, which is a huge shame because I loved their last album and what they did. But their new album, which I'll talk about later, is just unbelievable brutality of metal. But this song features Garrett Rapp from Color Morale, his first vocal performance in a new song since they went on their huge hiatus. They'll be coming back next year, so won't be surprised to see them in my list somewhere. unless their album's just terrible, but generally that doesn't happen. But this song is just absolutely brutal. I put it there because I felt like I had to give Garrett Rapp a shout out for, Cole Morales a shout out for coming back. But this song has got a really nice chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Battered and torn, still facing. It's just about it's a very simple song, about facing the storms of life and such.
Yeah, and Heartquake basically made a Color Morales song.
Yeah.
And that's why
it's
so
literally
good.
a Color Morales song, which it's great, and I'll be talking about it in Heartquake later. So yeah, but that's that.
At number 9 is the first of a couple of pop albums that's going to appear on here, and that is Brat by Charlie XCX. This album, a lot of people are going to say that this one got overexposed. Maybe it did a little bit, but I still really enjoyed it. I think my reason for enjoying this album is very simple. It's very well produced pop, and it has a lot of fun bangers on it. It knows what it is, and it doesn't try to be anything more than that, and I think that's what works in its advantage. It has an attitude to it, as the album title would imply, and I think it's nice to see a pop album with this more brash personality to it that we don't always get to see in pop albums. Charlie is not like the best vocalist out there, but she doesn't necessarily have to be because of the very strong production behind her. And I do think she has some interesting things in here to say, despite how simplistic some of the songs can be. Like, she starts off this album very arrogant, talking about herself as like the pop it girl, basically. But as the album goes on, she delves more into her insecurities and about how she doesn't feel like she's as recognized as she should be, but also maybe she isn't as good as she should be. And it becomes a more vulnerable album by the end, which I really appreciated. But still manages to have a lot of fun in the midst of that. My favorite song was probably Girls So Confusing, especially the remix that features another one of my favorite pop artists, Lorde, which was a very surprising collaboration to many people, because it was theorized for a while that these two had beef with one another, but it was revealed through this collaboration that it was a series of misunderstandings, which were, of course, increased by the media focusing on the feud so much and pitting them against one another, but they were able to resolve it in a very fun way that I really liked. I also found 360 to be a fun song, one of my favorite hit songs of the year. A very catchy beat, very catchy synth groove that many of you all probably heard this year. I think Sympathy of a Knife is a very clever one about the idea of trying to be vulnerable in the music scene as a pop star and how fans can turn against you so quickly for even trying to do that. Hence the title, Sympathy is a Knife. And then there's far more vulnerable lyrics like So I, where she mourns the loss of a loved one, that I found to be very powerfully done. And then ending the album with 365, which is similar to 360 but has a twist on the lyrics a bit, I think was a very smart way to end off the album. I understand why so many people really like this one. A lot of music critics are going to have this at their number one. I do think there's several albums that are better than it, but I still did really like this one quite a bit and found it to be a really good piece of sort of club-inspired pop that works well for what it is, very well. At number 9, this artist, she had the chance to have so many songs rank at this rank in my top 10, but I ultimately chose this one, and it's They're All Around Us by Poppy.
Yes, great song.
Yeah, Poppy had a killer year this year. It's not like she hasn't been famous before. I mean, has been known for quite some time. She was, of course, originally famous on YouTube for being very weird and like putting on this AI persona. But then she became a musician and she blew up with that. But I think this year she became more popular with the public than ever before. And I think that's because she chose collaborations so well. I loved her collaboration with Bad Omens this year, yes, and Violence Against Nature. That one was very close to making this spot because I was addicted to that song all year long. But then she topped herself with Suffocate with Knocked Loose, yep, which is just an absolutely wild song where she proves that she can like scream with the best of them. Like she's pretty on a pretty close tier with Courtney LaPlante of Spirit Box as far as female screamers go right now. She is so talented, and it's clear she's been perfecting her craft. But They're All Around Us ended up being my favorite thing she did this year. And while her album won't be in my top 10, it came pretty close because I found it to be really strong. Just the variation in styles and it being produced by Jordan Fish, formerly of Bring Me the Horizon, added that effect. But this song, I mean, she basically took classic metalcore and made it her own, in my opinion. It has everything that you could want from a mainstream metalcore song, including, like, she does a little bleh that is obviously meant to be fan service, but it works so well. And her screams in this song, they just really got to me when I heard it. Just so brutal and angry. And I like that the song just sort of lives in its bitterness. It just stays angry, and I think it's just so much more fun for that fact. And then the chorus is so freaking catchy. One of the catchiest choruses of the year by far. I especially love the final time that the chorus repeats where she lets her voice go higher. That really brought the song over the top for me. And I mean, the commentary on the song about like all our heroes abandoning us and like this feeling of paranoia that people are always going to turn against you. It works very well for the album Negative Spaces. And I think my favorite Poppy song is probably still Anything Like Me, but this one comes in a very close second.
Yeah. Well, as funny as it is, none of Poppy's songs made my top 10, but her album did. That's my number 8, is Negative Spaces, her album from this year. I was not super familiar with her musical choices as I was with her ridiculous, wacky AI thing that she did. But this album, if Chromacopia wasn't a surprise, this was probably an even bigger one. Just because I knew she had this reputation. But like, my gosh, she has, like you said, she has taken metal and, made it into something interesting. This has metal, this has rock, this has pop, this has pretty much everything in between. My favorite song from the album is not a metal song. It's Crystallized.
Oh, that one's a close second.
Crystallized has lived rent-free in my head probably 7 days a week for the last 3 weeks.
That's a great song. Yes,
Crystallized is, and it has no screaming. It has no, I think it has guitar, but it's a pop song.
Straight up pop song.
Which is like, it could have been in my top 10. It's got to be an honorable mention for me at least. But this song has a little bit of Madonna, a little bit of everything in it. This album feels very Madonna when it's pop, and it feels extremely Spirit Box in its metal.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
The opening song is this classic arena rock, Have You Had Enough? Even her vocals, she uses that distorted double voice effect to give that arena rock. Perfect opening. The Cost of Giving Up has an unforgettable chorus. Vital, Push, Go, Nothing. That whole thing is like, that's sort of like the pop central of the album, is those 3 songs.
Vital really reminds me of Avril Lavigne, pop punk Avril Lavigne.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Then she went to The Sinners Falling Out, which is 2.5 minutes of you have to look up the lyrics to understand what she's saying.
That's her knocked loose moment.
That's her knocked loose moment, yeah. Oh my gosh, that song was unbelievable. I was like surprised. Surviving on Defiance is a beautiful soft song. Ends with Halo, which is, it feels like one of those like definitive ending songs that you can't forget about. It kind of reminded me of like the ending of an era album that's like, oh my gosh,
it's beautiful.
I just listened to a beautiful album. This is a great album. Really, really surprised by this one. So yeah. My number 8 song is Seeker by Ghost Atlas.
Did not hear that one.
Ghost Atlas.
Oh yeah, that's a side project. Jesse Cash's side project.
Jesse Cash's side project. It's funny, his main project didn't make my top 10 for the first time ever since I started doing lists. Which is, era not making my top 10 might be a sin, but that just shows how ridiculous this year was.
Yeah.
But this song was an outstanding. It sort of sits there in the middle of the album. It's one of those you'd probably forget about, but this one just never left my mind. It has this very, very soft beginning, with just, it has no backing instruments aside from this nice acoustic guitar riff, and then halfway through the album, halfway through the song, it blasts into this incredible repetition of these lyrics: "Seeker, bleed all the love you can find, I wander on." It's this really creative song about searching for someone you love. It's beautiful. I love this song. The album I'll be talking about later too, but Jesse Cash, man, this guy just does not know how to miss.
Yeah. Okay, my number 8 album is from a band that I have always viewed as solid, but they've never really pushed themselves over the top for me until this year, and that is Eminence with the Black. This album really impressed me. Eminence has made concept albums before, but I think this is their best concept album by a long shot. I don't know. I'm a sucker for albums that talk about the reality of death and do so in a very honest way, but don't let like it become overwhelmingly dystopian at the same time. Like there's still hope shining through the cracks, even though in this album it can be a little hard to find those layers of hope because of how dark it can get. But I mean, this is my favorite Eminence album by a long shot. The ambition that they take on this, I mean, the singles that I heard I did like, but I think the later sequels that I didn't listen to until the album came out are where the album shines brighter. Come Hell or High Water and Desolation are both solid, but I think that this album gets far better. Come What May was close to being my favorite on the album because of that 3-minute symphonic ending that, I mean, I legitimately teared up when I heard it.
Unbelievable.
It's just so gorgeous. I mean, it's so absolutely ambitious. I just, this album takes so many risks that I love. Death by a Thousand Cuts has a gorgeous chorus. I love the scream singing that the lead vocalist does in this track. And The Call of the Void is a really just delving on fittingly into the darkest parts of the album, and I really love that one. Especially how he sings out like the Watch the World Burn part is just something that really gives me chills every time I hear it. And the title track, I mean, my goodness, talk about just a massive song. Just does so many cool things, and it was a moment that really just legitimately left me speechless. I was like, by the end of this album, I was like, wow, this band just really pushed themselves into just some incredible territory. And then ending with the instrumental Le Noir was just the perfect way to end the album. I loved that instrumental.
Which is, of course, the Black and French.
Yeah, the Black and French. And it just leaves you contemplating about the listening experience you had. I mean, this is one of those rare albums where it gets better as it goes on. Like, you start in a pretty solid place, but it just gets better and better as you delve deeper into it. And I mean, I loved this release. It was a really great piece of metalcore. And the symphonic elements in it really, I think, were what pushed it to being an even better territory.
The fact that he does it.
Yes.
He does the main violin. Like, yes. Oh my gosh, this guy is so talented.
Yes. And then my number 8 song is Take Your Mask Off by Tyler, the Creator,
yes,
featuring Daniel Caesar and LaToya Williams. I think this one, even though this one isn't the title track of the album, I think it's sort of the main point of the album. Like, this one gives the main theme of the album, talking about, like, the idea that I was talking about when I talked about the album, of, like, everyone wearing masks, and out of fear or insecurity, and, like, the song is very... What I really like about the song is how empathetic it is, because Tyler, the Creator, goes into, like, different perspectives of different people. Like, he talks about a wannabe gangster, a priest who is hiding his sexuality, a single mom, and then he talks about himself, and in a cool twist talks about how he relates to all 3 of the people that he talked about originally, and, like, how he sees himself in each of them. And, I mean, the whole song is tied together by the chorus, which has just gorgeous, gorgeous jazz influences in it. I love Daniel Caesar's voice. and LaToya Williams' voice, they're both gorgeous. And Tyler, the Creator, is no slouch when it comes to singing either. He has a great, clean voice too. And I mean, every time that beautiful piano
and he doesn't need auto-tune for it.
Oh, but when that piano comes in too, I just the whole song is just a beautiful piece of just one of the most empathetic rap songs that I've heard, and I love the subject matter in it. I think it's very powerful, and this one, I mean, it's easily my favorite from the album, just for how well written it is, and sound wise, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. My number 7 album, while it's not as high as the band I'm going to compare it to, I'm going to compare this release. I'm going to dare to compare this release to How Fleeting, How Fragile by Time the Evaluator. In terms of its impact on me, even though it's not even close to as high as that album was. This is Freaks by Avril Eyes.
Oh.
I adored this album.
Yeah, good album.
Oh my. It's only 8 tracks, but there are some really solid cuts on here. Everything about this band album just screamed Time the Evaluator to me for some reason. Just the way everything, like each song just like does some really cool stuff. You know, Lotus is a great opening song. I love his unqueen vocals and the screamy Queen vocals. Each song is a highlight of itself. I feel like any song of this album could have been in my top 10 songs. I'll be talking about one of the songs later. This album just really blew me out of the water with how good it was. And this is this band's first album, which is super impressive. That this, with songs like Stab by Stab, which, just has this really interesting guitar riff under it that's like very understated, but it has some really nice Queen vocals. And the ending track is one of those tracks that just feels very like, the end of the album sort of vibes. Very, very good album really solid album overall. I feel like I could have had this one higher if it wasn't such a freaking good year.
Yeah.
But I was really impressed by this for it being their first album.
Very impressive. Yes.
So I look forward to see what they do in the future. Hopefully they don't go the Time the Evaluator route, though.
Yep, I hope not.
Saying those 3 words feels like I just cursed them.
Yep.
But anyways, I digress. My number 7 song, this band is always going to be somewhere in my top 10, so fear not. My number 7 song is Crawl Backwards Out of Heaven by Era. This is JTKV at his finest. This guy has just proven me wrong time after time. The first 2 albums under him were very solid, albeit a little bit straightforward. He did not get to express his range, probably for being under Sumerian Records. But when they went over to UNFD, this guy has just completely gone off the walls. Their self-titled album is one of my favorite metal albums of all time. But I digress. This song is unhinged evil, and it's awesome. It has this very oppressive guitar riff and bass under it. Jesse Cash just has this very haunting low mid range vocals in this song, saying Crawl Backwards Out of Heaven. It's just this very unsettling song. It was the standout of the album for me, an album that I thought was okay, but didn't do a whole lot for me. But this song did a lot for me. I love this song. Incredibly impactful for me.
At number 7 is a band that I believe the last time they appeared on my list was in 2019, and that's simply for the fact that was the last time they released an album, so it has been a while from them. But that is the pop rock band Marianas Trench with their album Haven. When I talked about them in 2019, I don't know if you remember me talking about them.
I do actually remember
they released an album inspired by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
But this
album,
and that album was more pop, but this one is more classic rock in the vein of, I think, Queen is a very apt comparison to make here. But this album, it more goes back to their epic rock, pop rock routes that they had been known for. I still really like their pop album, but I do think this one is better. And once again, it has lead singer Josh Ramsey's penchant for loving like literary minded concepts, because this one talks about Joseph Campbell's character journey. Like, each track is representative of the 13 steps in the character's journey, like the call to action, the meeting of the mentor, the climax, the all that different stuff that you see in like the classic hero's journey. But they talk about, like, the lead singer talks about it from his own perspective, like his journey through life, and it's very clever. Like, he talks about his experiences with the band, with relationships, and with more recently getting to become a father. And this album is one of the most inspiring releases of the year, I think, thematically. Because it starts out with A Normal Life, which is the most Queen-sounding song on the album, in my opinion. And one of my favorites on the album, where he establishes this idea that is a sort of classic hero's idea of wanting to leave your normal life and pursue something greater than yourself. And the desire is very palpable through the song, but as the album goes on and he talks about, like, his journey with relationships and stuff, it comes to this really cool conclusion of where he comes to this idea that a normal life can be extraordinary in its own way when you think about all the things you can experience in it. And it sounds a little cheesy the way I say it, but the band mean it so earnestly that it's like, it comes across really well. And not to mention that the music in this album is excellent, both the pop and the rock cuts. Lightning and Thunder is definitely a more poppy cut, but is so super catchy. Into the Storm and Worlds Collide are both very climactic moments on the album where they really bring in the orchestral elements in big ways, and it feels just so huge and appropriately so. But the more just straight up catchy tracks work very well too. Ancient History talks about him reflecting on past relationships and what they've taught him, and I love the saxophone in that song. I'm always a sucker for when a song can incorporate a saxophone really well, and that song does it. And Remember Me By reminds me of Michael Jackson in a way, in terms of his vocal styling, but it is just, the beat in it is immaculate, and it's so freaking fun to listen to. Yeah, there's just so many great moments on this album, and it's nice to see, like, a straight up, pretty much rock album with some pop elements finally making my list. Like, the last time a rock album made my list was, I think, 2020. So it's nice to see something from that genre making my list again, because rock is still my favorite genre. So it's nice to see that reflected for once. My number 7 song, and man, you were talking about evil. I think this song sounds pretty evil. Is Blinding Faith by Nocturne.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
This song,
oh my gosh,
yes. This song is utterly terrifying. Putting this off as one of the lead singles for your album is a pretty ballsy move, I've got to say.
But it's knocked loose.
But it's knocked loose, so, it makes sense for them. This is a punishing, angry track, talking about religious faith in a very interesting way. And talking about it in probably the most foreboding way you can. When I think of the album cover, this song is the one that I think most appropriately reflects the album cover. For the kid looking at the big imposing cross on a dark night, this song perfectly reflects that. I feel like if you can't get hyped to this song, then there's something wrong with you. Because the guitar
Any
work,
knocked loose song.
Yeah, but the guitar work in this one in particular is just so freaking good. The screams from Brian Garris, the guttural in this is... I don't know how it's humanly possible to produce a noise like that.
Yeah, they have, like, that part where all three of them scream each lyric. Oh my gosh, that part just lives rent-free.
Yeah.
Love that.
And the slowdown of the breakdown after the end, after he does the guttural, is so freaking good. I love the clashing perspectives of the person struggling with their faith, along with the dogmatic religious person, just commanding them to bow. It works really well for the song, and there's something about this song that feels like it shouldn't exist because of how brutal it is, but it's so freaking good. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, shout out Knocked Loose, from our little town of Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
All right, my number 6 album. I said I'd be talking about this. This is Incarnation by In Heart's Wake. Um, this album comes after, like I said, and I lied. They do not have 14 albums. I was completely off by that.
I thought that sounded a little too much.
They have 6, which is still a decent amount, but yeah. I digress. This album takes away any sort of melodic intrigue from their last album, Kali Yuga, which I loved that album to death. But this album is slap you in the face metal from beginning to end with no pauses, no chorus songs aside from the one with Color Morale. This album is just devastation from beginning to end. It starts off with Spitting Nails, which is a classic In Heart's Wake song with a riff that you can almost call exclusively theirs because they just have this super recognizable guitar tone that I love. Even though their songs are so like brutal, they have this guitar tone that's almost like light, or I don't know how to describe it. It's very weird.
It's a unique guitar tone.
It's a very unique tone. Hollow Bone was the lead single. That one's great. This whole album is sort of like folklore, almost gothic, like based. So each of the songs are sort of have a theme to them relating to like folklore. Orphan is just, oh my gosh, he if you want to talk about guttural screams, this guy gets into some guttural screams that I think came from the pits of hell themselves.
Yeah.
Orphan is it's each of these has a parentheses. Orphan in parentheses has the devil in parentheses, so it almost makes
very
sense.
fitting. Yes.
It's super interesting if you look into each of the sort of backgrounds to these songs, what they sort of represent and stuff. But this album is kind of sort of a concept album, but not really. Each song sort of has its own meaning, but this album is just like, I mean, you think of tracks like Shishigami, which has this super addicting chorus, even though it's all screaming, it still has a chorus technically. And the ending track, Transmission, is dang devastating too. Overall, this album really impressed me. I have a great affinity for In Heart's Wake since I discovered them, so no surprise this album ended up where it was. They are very good at what they do. And my number 6 song is from a fairly new band as far as I know. This is Easily Erased by Boundaries.
Pretty new, yeah.
I really love this band. I'm glad I found them. I'm not searching the lyrics for the song because, yes, so this song is one of the few on this album, which I'll, again, be talking about later. You'll find that's a theme. This is one of the few songs that has clean vocals in it because their album is mostly just straight up unclean vocals, but this one is pretty dang good. There's this one part of lyrics where it says, "Old love's lost but never gone. The things that we won't be and the places we won't see, they no longer haunt me. Hold a loaded gun to my love. Your hands are covered in blood, in the blood of the weak and the willing." It's this very brutal song about love lost, essentially. But this song was super cool. The queen vocalist is the drummer. I think there's very few bands that do that.
That's wild.
one that I mean, the obvious one that comes to mind is Under Oath, but yeah, it's a pretty dang good song. I really love just how honestly metal this band is. They are one of the straightforward bands. They don't do anything, orchestral or synth. They're just pure like rock, drums, guitar, drums, vocals. That's pretty much it. But this song really stood out for me because I think the queen vocalist should be given a little bit more work to do. But I understand being a drummer is hard. Yeah. But yeah, that was that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Boundaries, my number 6 album is Little More by Boundaries. I mean, I would put Easily Erased as my favorite on that album for sure. That one would be an honorable mention song for me. But I mean, what really impresses me about this album is it just takes you into its atmosphere right away. This album, it feels like an experience. Like, you come out of it like, wow, I just had something that no other album this year is going to be able to produce in the same way. It is punishing. It is unforgiving from beginning to end. It even ends on a pretty just foreboding note. where it doesn't really feel like there's much of a solution given, but nevertheless, I mean, the album feels very powerful in terms of talking about like struggles with mental health and living with the darkest parts of yourself. Um, it's a very just brutally punishing listen that I think is fully dedicated to what it does. It also helps that the album feels like it's straight out of the 2000s. I think a reason a lot of people did like this album was because it felt very nostalgic. Felt like something you would definitely hear in the 2000s, but it still felt like it belonged in the year it came out at the same time. It was very impressive how the band managed that. And yeah, there's so many great songs on here. So many. Something I really love about this song is the breakdowns that just sort of come out of nowhere, like they're there, and you're like, "Oh, that's happening right now." And it just works so well in terms of the tone of the album. I mean, from there's so many highlights on here. Curse to Remember, I absolutely love. Just super intense, as is Face the Blade. Scars on a Soul has one of my favorite sort of guitar progressions that keeps on going out throughout the song. Of course, Blame's Burden is a huge highlight with Marcus Vick on it. You can't go wrong with Invent Animate, and even though the song turns into an Invent Animate song halfway through, it's still very good. I mean, it was a nice soft moment in the midst of a very brutal album. And then the closer, Inhale the Grief. I mean, talk about just a very memorable way to close out an album. Just leaving you out on a very solemn, haunting note that just feels like you just feel so devastated by what you've heard. Yeah, it's a very dark album, but I think it works for what it does. And I do think it's a very special album from this year. My number 6 album couldn't be on the more opposite end of the spectrum, but it is still a very good song, and that is Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar. This song, I mean, it was a moment this year.
Yeah.
A cultural moment. Now, technically, I think Kendrick Lamar released a better song this year in Meet the Grams, which was far more devastating and just a nasty track. Sort of felt like you were listening to a horror movie in terms of how he was deconstructing Drake and writing letters to his family members. I mean, it was just so incredible to hear. I mean, it was fascinating that it was actually happening. But Not Like Us was it was sort of the final nail in the coffin, essentially. And as someone who has never been a particularly big fan of Drake and found him to be obnoxious and overhyped, it was nice to sort of see him get buried this year, I'm not going to lie. Especially since he's not a particularly good person. Now, there's a part of me that I will admit is a little uncomfortable that this song is such a banger because of the things that it is alleging about Drake. I mean, it's giving some pretty serious allegations here. But I also just can't deny that it is very fun. The beat by Mustard is so memorable. Kendrick's bars are just one after the other, absolute bangers. I mean, the first time I heard this song, some of the bars just left my mouth hanging open because of how unhinged they were, but they worked so well. And my particular favorite part of the song is where he talks about how Drake was trying to get street cred from all these other rappers, but it ultimately was ineffective for him, and he ends off by saying he's a colonizer, which is just such a wild thing, but it works so well.
Oh, it's so good.
And yeah, I mean, the song, like I said, it was a moment this year, and I can't imagine how Drake is feeling hearing people sing along to Strike a Chord, and it's probably A minor so many times in a live setting. It's just wild, but yeah, I mean, it's a very catchy song, very fun, and one of the best written of the year.
Yeah, 100%. So my number 5 album, is Dust of the Human Shape by Ghost Atlas. This, like I said, this is Jesse Cash's side project to Era. There was definitely a time where it would be hard pressed to find the difference between the two. But now I feel like Era has definitely separated itself a little bit. But this album is there was that standout song, but overall this album has just, he gets to, Jesse Cash gets to shine in his vocals in this album throughout. I mean, the opening track, Void Voyeur, is a pretty unforgettable opening. This album doesn't really, it flows from topic to topic, but overall this album is kind of just classic alternative rock. It very much so elicits early Coldplay, things like that. I really love what, the lead guitarist from Era, or the other guitarist from Era, is in this band, so you see the influences there. But I love the thing about Ghost Atlas is you get to see Jesse Cash's guitar work shine through. He has some of the best riffs in the industry, if not just straight up the best, probably. The title track is a really haunting melody. It In the House of Leaves is a great, like, it almost feels progressive rock in a way. And the album ends on a very, very typical Jesse Cash note that's very soft and melodic. He just does that with his ending tracks. Overall, I don't have much of a bad thing to say about this album. The only thing I'd say about it is maybe it feels like there are tracks that feel very samey. That's why it couldn't get any higher than this. But I do, I just think he's probably my favorite clean vocalist at the moment.
Oh yeah.
Without a doubt. This band is just where he gets to let it shine. So absolutely love that album. And my number 5 song, is Dante by North Lane.
Yes, good choice.
So
I agree. I can't disagree.
So this is a North Lane song that's very soft. My favorite song from their album last year was one of the hardest songs on the album, Carbonized, which they opened their concert with, and I lost my mind when they did that, but I digress. This song is a much softer cut for them comparatively. It's got some really great synth work in it. I just love the direction North Lane is going, even though it's a bit softer. I don't care, because I think Marcus's Queen vocals are incredible and have gotten better and better since Alien, which is still their best album. But this song is undoubtedly about, love hurting us. The chorus is just so unforgettable. I hate the silent reminders of nothing but heartache. Who's to decide what is right when your choice was cathartic? Like, those lyrics have stuck with me all year. This song was super early in the year too, and it
actually came out last year, believe it or not.
Did it?
Yep.
Well, I'm including it with the album.
It came out. Yeah, it came out. I put it in my top 50 favorite songs of the year because I listened to it more this year than I did last year.
Yeah. Well, it technically came out this year, but that I love this song.
The freaking piano ending is so good.
Yeah, and he goes falsetto, which he didn't really do before, and that little falsetto ending, that's great stuff.
Also, I can't help but love the little synth breakdown they do, and that reminds me a lot of Linkin Park.
Yeah, Linkin Park,
like the Thousand Suns era of Linkin Park, which is one of my favorites of theirs. Yeah, so good.
Good point.
Okay, my number 5 album is from probably my favorite mainstream, like big mainstream pop artist, and that is Billie Eilish with Hit Me Hard and Soft. This is her best album, without a doubt, for me. And I think it's because it does a lot more than just be a pop album. But this is something that's always been typical of Billie Eilish, I feel like. Even early in her career, she was doing stuff that some pop artists late in their career aren't even daring to try, which is why I've always been so impressed with her. But on this album, she pushes herself forward into just some really incredible territory. And I mean, this album from front to back is nearly flawless for me. Just so many fun tracks, so many just beautiful sounding tracks too. This album has such a good atmosphere to it, and really lets the songs breathe and live. A lot of the songs here are over 4 minutes long, which is not typical for a pop album. So it's just doing so much to let the moments breathe and let you live in them. One of my favorites on the album is Chihiro, which is a reference to Spirited Away, by the way, the main character of Spirited Away. I really love the backing beat of this one. The bass groove is super catchy. Her falsetto voice in the chorus is gorgeous. And yeah, the song about like living in a cycle of a relationship that you can't get out of is very well done. One that's really grown on me is the opening track, Skinny, where she talks about her insecurities with body image. And even though it's maybe more of a typical Billie Eilish sounding song, I think it's still a really good one of hers. Birds of a Feather was one of my favorite hits of the year. Just a really good love song, a pretty classic 90s inspired love song, I feel like. And it goes from the melodrama and like her saying that she'll love this person till the day she dies, but it feels very genuine and very just well-intentioned. My favorite on the album is The Greatest, which just sort of has this big rock climax in it that comes out of nowhere but really works. And the subject matter of the song is incredibly devastating too. And then the album ends very well with Blue, which I would say is sort of the title track of the album, and just really leaves you contemplating on what was a really good experience throughout this album. I mean, there's not really that much negative I could say about this album. I think it's a really good piece of pop. I think it went pretty underrated this year in favor of some other pop albums that I think were more mediocre than it, but nevertheless, I did really enjoy this one. Then at number 5, this track would be the one that I would say was sort of the slow burn grower for me this year, but the more I heard it, the more I loved it, and the more I knew it was my favorite track from the album it came off of, and that is Continuum by Eminence.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, Come What May was my favorite for the longest time because I do love that symphonic, 3-minute symphonic part at the end, but this one, I think it does its atmosphere so freaking well that it just really came out on top for me. The way, I mean, it just feels like the embodiment of like transitioning from one life to the next, because the song is all about like chasing time is what the chorus literally says, and the whole song feels like you're at the end of your life and you're moving on into the next phase, and it's so, I think it's the embodiment of that so well because it talks about like the fear of that and the more very intense verses of the song, where it has some of the most intense guitar work on the album, in my opinion, with just an earth-shattering breakdown. So freaking good. But then the chorus, I mean, it is one of the most beautiful things I've heard this year. I love the chorus so much. Along with like the, electronics in the background with the violin going. It's just so beautiful. And the last iteration of the chorus where he lets his voice go so high, I mean, every time I hear that, it is so just gorgeous and chilling and really powerful. I mean, the band just created, the lyrics here are great, but I think the music experience is really what brings this song over the top for me.
And that's to be said about the entire album.
Yeah.
Too. 100%.
It's just wild how the music alone can speak for itself.
Without it.
I mean, yeah, just this one, yeah, like I said, it was a slow burn grower for me, but it's easily my favorite on the album now.
My number 4 album is Yume by Floya. Floya is the band that the lead singer of Time the Evaluator went to
I didn't
after
even
they
know
split.
they came out with an album.
Yes, yep. It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. This guy's voice is undeniably one of the most beautiful, clean vocals of all time. While he doesn't bring out his unclean vocals, albeit he barely did it in Time the Evaluator anyways, there's no unclean vocals here. This is a straight-up sort of rock, alternative rock album. This album is a real breath of fresh air because he left Time the Evaluator for various mental health reasons. But this album is very, very upbeat and positive and full of really, like, I don't know, the best word would be bubbly guitar riffs. I don't know how else to describe it. One of the songs from here, Epiphany, was one of my favorite songs from last year. That song is still the standout of this album. Just has a gorgeous, unbelievably gorgeous chorus. This album really just has that sort of, I don't know, it's very classic alternative rock, but it has this really nice synth undertone that you'd expect from him going to a different band. It's only 10 tracks, but each song really has this just very nice upbeat feel to it. And this album, I cannot say enough about how a lot of albums from my favorites this year are talking about very dark, coming from dark places, but this album is a pretty positive, upbeat album overall, which is and it was just really nice. And you couldn't turn around more opposite for my number 4 song, which is actually technically a duo song. I labeled it as a duo song because these two tracks sort of come into each other perfectly. It's Moss Covers All / Take Me Home by Knocked Loose. These are horror songs.
Yeah.
Straight up. I don't think aside from Slipknot I've ever heard songs quite like this. While Moss Covers All is a little bit more straightforward. It's only 50 seconds. It's just screaming, constantly. Take Me Home is an experimental track with this unforgettably terrifying undertone. I don't even know what instrument it would be. Maybe I think it's a guitar.
It's a very weird sounding
guitar.
It's a
very low-toned guitar that it sounds. I think you have to watch the music video to sort of get the full effect of what the song is trying to do, because the music video is awesome and terrifying. But this, I don't know. Of all the album, I could have had so many songs from this album, but this one was the one that stuck out to me, and it's just because it's so unique and so different. It doesn't really have a lot of lyrics, but Take Me Home just has this brutally terrifying ending, this buildup of all these different sounds and sonic energies, and it's it builds up into this complete silence, and that's what builds into the song after that. But these two songs, I don't know, there's, the whole album is a concept album, really, in its own right. But these two songs, whereas you said, the song that you said, Blinding Faith defined this album. For me, these two songs defined the album just because it had this, it felt like a horror movie within an album. It felt like an A24 movie within a horror album.
Within that's an album.
Fair. But yeah, I love how unique and different this duo song was. I don't know if I've ever had really a duo song, but this was kind of a unique one that's it just left me every time.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, my number 4 album is my favorite rap album of the year easily, and that is GNX by Kendrick Lamar. This album, I would debate, I think it might be Kendrick Lamar's most accessible in many ways. One of his easiest to get into because of just the sheer amount of absolute bangers it has on it. It is such a fun album, and as if Kendrick needed to prove himself more. I mean, he released a surprise album out of nowhere that did very well, and could be one of his best. I think To Pimp a Butterfly is still my favorite by him, but this one, and probably, what is his second album called? I can't believe I can't remember it right now. Good Kid, Mad City. That one's also probably better than this one, but this one is quite good. The flows he has on this are just insanely good from front to back. The album has great variety in it. It has some softer moments, like the more pop rap cut Luther with a beautiful vocal performance from SZA, probably one of the best R&B vocalists out there. And their chemistry is really good. And Kendrick has a great singing voice here. I know he can sing, but he just doesn't do it that often. And then you've got more of a darker song like Hey Now, which really just has such a good atmosphere to it, and was one that was actually close to making my spot on number 6 for my favorite Kendrick Lamar song for the year, just because of how menacing it is. And then you got TV Off, which sort of feels like the sequel to Not Like Us in terms of its beat. It has a Mustard beat as well, and it has sort of this now infamous shouted line of Mustard where Kendrick is screaming it out loud. That's so much fun. And the song even has like comments on all the diss tracks that Kendrick came out with this year. But another thing I love about the song is that Drake released a diss track later after Not Like Us called "The Heart Part 6." Part 6. That was a really bad response to Kendrick's diss tracks. Just trying to go into defense mode but utterly failing. And then Kendrick releases a song on this album called "The Hard Part 6," which is a far better and more nuanced version of the song, where he responds to it, and also goes into some of his own personal life experiences, and I found it to be really good. The closing track, Gloria, is great, once again featuring SZA. Squabble Up is an absolute banger. Definitely, like, probably the most crowd-pleasing track on the album. The chorus is so strange with the way that Kendrick sings out the chorus, but it's very fun and meant to be sort of tongue-in-cheek. But yeah, I mean, this is just a great album from front to back, with a lot of really just great songs in it. Then at number 4 is, in my opinion, the song with the chorus of the year, and that is Sandman by Resolve. Resolve is one of the most underrated metalcore bands right now. They have slowly just risen up the ranks for me as one of my favorites working right now. And that's because, I mean, just the way they write their choruses is so well done. They just managed to make them very catchy and just stick in your head for weeks on end. This one I just kept coming back to time and time again. This was actually a deluxe track from their album that came out last year. They released a deluxe edition this year, and this song might be my favorite of theirs at this point. It's just so much fun. They talk about anxiety in this song, and living with that dread, and I love how the verses sort of reflect that with the lead vocalist's very brutal screams. And the song also stays sort of unpredictable. Like, after the chorus happens the first time, you sort of expect them to just sort of go back into the standard, like, scream vocals again, but instead they move forward with the clean vocals in a very unexpected way that's really cool sounding, before going back into the chorus again, and the chorus sounds even better than before because they are adding in this instrumentation very subtly. It works very well. And then they have what is also maybe my favorite breakdown of the year, that just keeps going and going. When you think it's stopping, it just adds in a new twist that I really love. And then they end off with the chorus again in a very crowd-pleasing way that I loved. This song is just, I mean, it takes the standards of metalcore and I think twists them a little bit to make them more interesting. And I always like when a metalcore band does that.
Okay. Similar with my movies, my number 3 and number 2 albums could have gone either way. But my number 3 album is Death is Little More by Boundaries. I absolutely adore this album to death. There's really nothing particularly bad I can say about this album except that it's not my number 2 and number 1. You know, James said a lot of the stuff that I agree with. This album just, there's no rest, there's no reprieve. Similarly to Incarnation, this one starts off with Turning Hate into Rage, which is a song that is exactly like its title suggests. It starts with vocals and does not stop. This album just goes from catharsis to catharsis. Like, some of these songs, you listen to emotions that you're like, yes, give these to me. And obviously, Easily Erased is one that I said is the highlight. The title track is great. A Pale Light Lingers, which has the lead singer of While She Sleeps in it, Lochi Kyo or whatever. And then Blame's Burden, like James said, is basically an Invent Animate song for half the time. Bloodsoaked Salvation has the guy from I always forget what the band's name is. Kublai Khan. His voice is ridiculous in this song. Mm-hmm. And then of course it ends with Inhale the Grief, which is a pretty brutal ending. But it leaves on a kind of half note. It's like, the last line is it's getting better every day. So it's like it's kind of a positive note. But this album is exceptionally brutal, and it like James said, it's really an experience. Like, each song has its own soundscape, but they perfectly mesh into each other too for a full experience, really. My number 3 song was a standout from an album that I placed very low, but this song is Canvas by Avril Lavigne.
Good choice.
This was the standout for me. I love this song. I think the thing that I'm gonna obviously point to this song is the saxophone outro, which they just perfectly mold into with all these symphonic, not symphonic in the sense of orchestra, but synthonic, I guess you'd call it, but I don't know what you actually call it. But this song just really has some great lyrics to it. So tell me, is there a meaning to this journey, struggling to turn back and leave it all behind? Will I ever live for the moment, believing all the omens? It's basically sort of about living in the moment to a certain extent. But this song really is a journey in and of itself. I mean, it's 6 minutes. It's very, very atmospheric. It has all the intonations of what I think this band is doing right, which is just letting the vocalist sign when instruments sign, and having this sort of very different vibe to it. I love this song. This was one of those songs that I listened to 100 times this year, probably. That might be an exaggeration, but a lot of times.
Okay, my number 3 album. This one was my number 1 for a long time, so that speaks to how great this year was for music, that 2 albums can go above this one. But it's You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To by Knocked Loose. An album like this is not normally my cup of tea. I do normally prefer metalcore with at least a little bit of clean vocals in them. But, I mean, this album was just sort of undeniable from the first time I heard it. The way it just presents itself is so well done. It is not shy about introducing exactly what it's going to be, just a brutal assault of the senses for 29 minutes, with just dark, horrifying lyrics, and there's no way out for 29 minutes at least. But it manages to do a lot of interesting things in that time that I think could go a little underrated in the midst of just focusing on like the brutal breakdowns. There's more to the album than just that, I think. Like Joseph was talking about, like with Moss Covers All and Take Me Home, just some really unique instrumentation choices there with the unsettling guitar riff that feels like very distorted and dissonant. It's just, it puts you on edge when you hear it. Or Suffocate just having that very unique feature from Poppy, as well as what some have described as like a reggaeton build up to a breakdown. I'm not sure if I hear it, but they say like the drum patterns are very similar to reggaeton songs, which is so strange. And Knocked Loose even commented on that and said that was intentional, which I find so interesting. Or the really fun sequel to Slaughterhouse from Motionless and White's album Slaughterhouse 2, which I like Slaughterhouse a lot. I in fact liked that Motionless and White album from last year, but I think Slaughterhouse 2 is better. And I mean, they let Chris Motionless do his thing. His screams sound excellent in that song. And then there's a Sit and Mourn, which I feel like has gone severely underrated on the
severely.
album. Because it is the quote-unquote softest moment of the album. It gives you... I like that it gives you a moment to, like, just reflect, and just the instrumental ending is so freaking good.
And since this album is my number 2, I'll go in and add to it.
Yeah.
I love... This album is a concept album, like I said. I love the constant I forgot what the word for it is. This constant mantra that the synth like thing that plays at the beginning of Sit and Mourn. There's this, anyone who's listened to the album will know what I'm talking about. This synthy thing that plays at certain points of the song, like at the beginning of Suffocate, at the beginning of Sit and Mourn. It's this sort of thematic feeling to the song. It's like, it's almost this moment when you want to sit back, like, and you know, the last song uses it for quite some time. Like the first minute of Sit and Mourn is kind of just silence. And, you know, after the onslaught that you've just experienced, having that moment, everything just hits you at once. And then Sit and Mourn is this brutal song about him losing a friend. And it's just like, and it all wraps up together in this incredible ending song. And I agree that people have looked at the other songs, which is not a horrible thing to do.
No.
But that song, while it's also the only one that I think is over 3 minutes long, is exceptionally impactful.
Yeah. Also, shout out to the freaking great drum pattern that is on The Calm That Keeps You Awake. One of my favorite moments on the album. That one is a close second to me for Blinding Faith. I love that song too. But yeah, that was my number 3. Now my number 3 song, once again, could be a more opposite side of the spectrum. I talked about this artist back in 2020 as a very promising new pop duo, and they have proven themselves again this year. This song is called Image and is by Magdalena Bay. This is, I mean, I don't think you can get much better synth pop than this song. It sounds so good. And I really like when a song can just sort of make a catchy instrumental interlude and make it work. Like this song for about a minute and a half has nothing but an instrumental going on, a synth instrumental, and it is one of the most catchy things I've heard this year. The vocal performance from Micah Tenenbaum is very unique. It is something that admittedly might be an acquired taste to some, but I really do like her voice. It's really interesting, and I think it helps with creating the sort of eerie atmosphere in the song, as it fits with the concept of the album that it comes from, of this person going through this procedure to become the perfect version of themselves, becoming a brand new image. But the song frames it in a way that it's obviously not a good thing that they're going through this procedure. Like, the idea behind the concept of this album is they're inserting a disc into their head, and becoming like a new version, like the best version they can. And there's this countdown that's going into the song where she's like 22 more minutes, 20 more minutes, and then it goes down to like 1 more minute, and then there's this sort of explosion at the end with guitars and stuff where it's like, oh, they're this new person, but it's not a good thing at all. It's horrifying. And I'll admit, this song, I liked it even more when some fans of the band started making edits of it along with the substance. Because, like, the song does feel like it would fit right in with the substance in terms of its subject matter of, like, becoming the best version of yourself.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
And the music video for the song is really interesting, too. It's one of the weirdest music videos I've seen this year, but it does fit with the vibe of the song really well. Yeah, this song is just really interesting, and I think is sort of the perfect synth pop song, ultimately, and the sort of commentary going on in it is what makes me like it even more.
I already added what I wanted to say to Knocked Loose. You Won't Go. Pretty much had everything to say about that. I'll rescind the rest of my statements because there's nothing else I really have to add aside from it's just a great album, and I think, yeah, I'll rescind my whatever I was gonna say, which was basically the same stuff as James said.
Yeah.
So, my number 2 song is by
song. Sorry.
Yeah, album.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. My number 2 song is "How We Used to Say Goodbye" by Invent Anime.
Good choice.
There's pretty much. I don't think there's ever going to be a year where an Invent Anime won't be there, unless there's a year where they just don't release a single or an album.
Probably next year.
But next year, yeah, I imagine
they won't release anything.
But my gosh, their last 2 songs, they've gone their softer route, which I'm not going to complain about. Marcus Vick has an unbelievably gorgeous soft voice. As much as I love when they go all out berserk, this song is pretty straightforward, and it's about saying goodbye to letting go of grief. It's an extremely emotionally driven song. I have to imagine this is personal for Marcus and probably the band. This song just has some incredible lyrics. It's the chorus is so passionate and like emotional.
Yes.
I'm letting go, we'll never make it through. You left me suffocated, so isolated, I'm letting go. And just the atmospheric undertones. These guys are masters of it at this point. It's undeniable with Heavener. And this song, you could see it, with the title track. They released a definitive edition with both of those on it, so it's one of those tracks that fits perfectly right in it as like an extra great ending to the album. So it's like, and this band is just undeniable. Like this song was a standout from the minute I listened to it. It's one of those songs you probably don't listen to frequently, but it's one of those when you listen to it, you are listening to it for a good reason, probably. I love it.
You know you've made it as a band when there are a lot of groups coming out that are basically making lesser versions of your sound. I've noticed, I checked out several bands this year that sounded like Invent Animate clones, but just missing the point.
Yeah, only one.
But you know you've made it when you got, I mean, they have their, I feel like their style is their own. I don't think anybody else does it like them.
It's so unique. It's so fascinating what it is. But yeah.
Okay, my number 2 pick. Talk about this like being the year for new metalcore bands. This band is pretty much brand new to this year. They popped up on my YouTube recommended. And this is another year where it's like YouTube recommended does come through a lot of times with music. They give some great recommendations. But I'm so glad I decided to check out this band. They're called Alt, and their album is called From the New World. It is, I mean, this album is only about 35 minutes long, but it feels longer because of, like, the epic atmosphere they establish in the album. They go into this, like, they talk about this technological dystopia in the song that's very interesting. It feels very 1984 inspired. And in a way that I feel like actually understands the source material of that novel better than a lot of people do. But it does have some small moments of hope in it too. But I do have to say that even though the lyrics are good on this album, I think the music is really, the sound of the album is really where it excels. Remnant is, and this, keep in mind, if you listen to this album, a lot of these songs are coming from a band who's pretty new, and it's wild what they accomplish here. Remnant is probably the most classic metalcore sounding song on the album and a good way to open up the album with a really good chorus. Then you've got like The Orphan Breed, which is just utter brutality. Has some of these just these guitar riffs that like stack on top of each other and it's weird. They make the guitar riffs sound like synth grooves and the way they make them sound. It's so weird, but it works very well for the song and creates just a massively brutal soundscape. This band is part of a genre called Fall, so they have a lot of like very distorted guitar work that's very unique. Ephemeral feels very inspired by Era. This was a huge highlight for me. Just a very bigger than life sound, and once again, has some really cool guitar riffs that just sort of left my jaw hanging open. And the closer cycle is just sort of superb and leaves you just sort of stunned at what you've heard. There are Echoes is also a really good song, although one of the more accessible. This guy's clean vocals and this album are so freaking good. He does the sing-scream combo that I absolutely love on a lot of the songs that really works. And what I really like about their breakdowns is that they let them have space. Like, they let them breathe, and it's just very interesting. But my favorite song on the album comes in by a number 2 song of the year, which is called Aquila. This song is, it is something else. I was left sort of dumbstruck the first time I heard it. It is the most dystopian-sounding song on the album. And it talks about this idea of everyone uniting under one technological hive mind. And like the technological hive mind, they literally call it God. It is it's meant to be terrifying, but it's like coming from the perspective of the person creating the hive mind. So he's like trying to sell them on this.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is so good. And then the chorus just, talk about a mind-blowing experience. The scream singing in the chorus is so freaking good. And the way it explodes out of nowhere is just wild. And the song ends in the most eerie, bone-chilling way possible with just this very atmospheric guitar riff. And like the little mantras of like reset, renew, rebuild, reinstall God is just, it feels inhuman. But it works so well for what it does. Just truly a song that came out of nowhere, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow, this is just incredible.
Okay. I don't think my number one album is going to be any surprise to you for how much I've talked about this album, but my number one album of 2024 is The Black by Eminence. My lord, has there not been an album that I've listened, this is like era levels of how many times I've listened to this album this year. When you find that album that you know, it's like, this album is, to me, it might be, I don't know if it's the strongest 5 out of 5 I've given since I started rating. That'd probably be Era's self-titled. But this comes dang freaking close. This album is just unbelievable. What it does. You know, it's obviously a concept album about death. And it, you know, obviously, like you said, the opening, Come Hell or High Water, the first two songs are fairly straightforward. And there are so many, you know, Death by a Thousand Cuts, like you said, Beyond the Pale. This guy has this incredible ability to create atmosphere with symphonics. You know, he himself plays the violin. It's super cool. And this album's impact on me reminded me of Beauty and Rage by Red. What it did for me. This, you know, Come What May was as close as it can get to my second favorite song. Just so many great cuts off of this one. And obviously The Black is just it's a title track that, you know, it's one of those title tracks that's like, yeah, that's a title track. Like, it reminded me of like my reaction to like dark matter from The Word Alive. Like that type of title track that you like don't expect to be as good or like deliver on what it's promising, but this album delivers on what it's promising tenfold, which is this gothic dark look at this person's journey essentially to death. And it's really awesome. But my number one song of the year comes from this album, and it's Heaven Shall Burn. This one has unbelievable symphonic work, like, oh my gosh. And this one is probably you know, tonally, it's got to be one of the darkest ones, because this one is basically from the perspective of a cultist, more or less. Has some incredibly visual lyrics. I love what they do visually. You know, when they have their lyrics, you can see this terrible, horrible world they're envisioning. I've eaten the lies to feed all my demons. I'll cover my eyes when the skies are burning. The time has come to bleed as one. The suffering has just begun. Like, oh my gosh, you can see it there. Like, just the horrible things that are going on in this cultist's, you know, moment of this album. And I love the orchestration behind it, the guitars, his raspy, clean vocals. This is a song that is going to stick with me for quite some time.
And in my number one album spot, I think this is the first year that a pop album has made my number one, but this album is so freaking good. And like any good album in any genre, it does transcend its genre, and that's Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay. I said back in 2020 that this band had potential to be great, and I think they more than proved that on this album, which is pretty near a 5 out of 5 for me. It has some psychedelic elements in it, too, reminiscent of something like Pink Floyd that really pushed this album forward, and it's inspired by, like, classic pop artists like ABBA and things like that, so it really just works well. And I'm a sucker for a good concept, and this album has a really good concept arc of, like, as I was saying with Image, I mean, Image gives the main theme of the main idea of the album, that this idea of trying to become the most perfect version of yourself, but like losing who you actually are in the process of that. And the whole album analyzes that in such interesting ways. And man, there are just so many just great songs on here. Death and Romance comes in a very close second to Image for me, with just how beautiful it is. I love the piano in the song, and the synths in it are just so well produced, as is the case throughout the whole album. Vampire in the Corner is one that I feel like has gone severely underrated. That's My Floor is a straight up rocker. I mean, they do a little bit of everything on this album, but That's My Floor feels like the dystopic bottom of this album, where they become just the most distorted version of themselves and are living in this hedonistic lifestyle as a result. It's so interesting. But the album does have an optimistic ending with the ballad of Matt and Micah, which is referencing the duo in this band, and talking about the idea that, yeah, they may not be perfect as they are, but they're going to try to be happy with who they are as people and not try to push themselves to be perfect versions of themselves. The album plays into some bizarre territory, which I appreciate. It takes some risks. And yeah, it just feels like a movie and a music version. Like I said, I feel like this album is a good pairing with The Substance, for an example. It just feels like a very cinematic experience of an album, which is why I really liked it a lot. And yeah, I think it's just such a great pop album, one of the best I have ever heard, if not the best pop album I've heard, period. Then my number one song comes in Haven by Marianas Trench. When we listen to the song, I think you'll probably be able to figure out why this is my number one, but I'll go ahead and explain it here. This song is nearly 9 minutes long. It is an epic rock track that basically concludes all the arcs that the album has gone on, in discussing different musical moments. It even includes, like, and I think you will appreciate the song more if you listen to the album, because it includes specific musical moments from earlier songs on the album to, like, tie everything together.
A la Periphery.
Yeah. And it even includes musical moments from previous albums of theirs, just for fan service, because the fans are really attached to this band's story because they are a very literary-minded band. But it's very cleverly done. And, I mean, this song is just sort of mind-blowing in terms of just how many different movements it has, and it never once gets boring. It just feels like a concluding track in every way you could think of that word. Like, it's the perfect conclusion to an album. And yeah, like I said, I really like the way the song ends with the thematic resolution of, like, the normal life can be extraordinary if you really try to appreciate every moment of it. And then the album ends in just, like, this musical explosion, and Josh's vocals are just so freaking good. Like, he hits some notes that don't feel humanly possible, but he's one of the most talented vocalists in his genre right now. But yeah, this song, I mean, from the first moment I heard it, I knew it was going to be my number one, and nothing else came close this year for me.
Fair enough. All right, and that's about going to be it. Overall, great year for music as well.
Excellent year, yes.
So, that'll be that. Let us know what y'all thought of our lists. Were we wrong? We don't care if you thought that, so let us know your favorite songs and or albums. And we will see you just about around this time next year.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.